Welcome to Teleport, the Blake 7 podcast, conversations, explorations and celebrations, covering that classic BBC TV series. Blake 7 was a thrilling outer space saga that somberly closed out the 70s and fired us into the 80s, still being rediscovered by those who've come along decades since. Now, of course, we're well into the streaming age, and whether Blake 7 is an old favourite or your latest binge watch obsession, the course is confirmed, well, for long enough to at least get your fix with us here at Teleport. Yes, I'm your rebellious regular host, Dan Hadley, Birmingham's king of the geeks, OG B7 survivor. Yet part of what's kept this particular obsession of mine alive after all these decades is that I'm able to rattle on about it to anyone who'll stand or sit still for long enough to let me. And happily, I've managed to get a stable enough signal here to chase down two friends and Blake 7 viewers to discuss this very precise, very exciting time to be a Blake 7 fan. I've got Type 40's Sarah Graham and Keith Isles, the master of the home medium minefield himself here too, all gathered here on our flight deck to get stuck into talking Blake 7 after such a long time. Sarah, great to have you here. And Keith, it's brilliant to see you again.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, what an intro.
Vintage science fiction, everybody. It's an acquired taste for some, but I think that you're both fairly learned now, or at least you've got sensitive enough eyes and ears, haven't you, to make up for all the things that we have to when we look back at old telly.
You know what it's like, Dan, being a Doctor Who fan, you learn to love the things that you love and overlook other.
There is that carryover, isn't there? Some intellectual properties, be they movies or characters or TV shows from times past, could be termed as sleeping giants. They kind of exist in the corners long after their natural lifespan has sort of ended. They gather dust, but they grow their mystique and grow their legend. And but the sad thing about it all is that the energy that surrounds them at the beginning, that ends up becoming sort of more muted talk, and the talk becomes whispers. And those whispers, eventually they kind of manifest or transform into a kind of an air of nostalgia, really. It's sort of the circle of life of intellectual properties. Now and again, though, those sleeping giants have a habit of waking up. I've never been particularly convinced that Blake 7 itself is a sleeping giant, but in that time since the original transmission between New Year 78 and around Christmas time 1981, now and again Blake 7 has sort of writhed and rose. Recent times have been some of the most restless sleep of all. Umpteen fan projects, audio continuations and reworkings and side projects, real world and online get-togethers, all that's been happening, bolstered by the fact that the series is now streaming globally pretty much wherever you are. And now, at long last, after so many rumours, we've got the unveiling of the original series in a high-definition form, restored, enhanced, repackaged, and relaunched, maybe even teleporting to your precise location right about now. Let's take a look at how this exciting new range, Blake 7 The Collection, was heralded earlier this year.
Information.
Liars, cheats, smugglers,
thieves,
and they're the nice people.
I'm innocent.
We're all victims of a miscarriage of justice.
I think we make a good team.
Well, hooray for us.
Blake is becoming a legend.
He is just a man, backed by a handful of criminals, and that is all.
His name is a rallying call for Mount.
I've watched this a few times and I still get a kick out of it.
Yeah, it's a good
Right,
trip.
hang on, everyone. This is going to be rough.
I don't mind rough. It's fatal I'm not too keen on.
The Dirty Dozen
from space.
We got reviews like Bargain Basement Star Trek and things like that. I always negated that. I said, no, I don't believe that.
Director Michael E. Bryant. We're going to have a long conversation with him about Doctor Who.
He looks like Santa after a shave, doesn't he, Michael E. Bryant?
And Blake Seven.
I really loved doing episode 1. I really
particularly with that red jumper on.
I would have liked the entire series to
look how their faces light up talking about this stuff.
I had ideas for the spaceship.
Tell us about what your Liberator would have looked like. Something more abstract, I think.
It would have been, yes.
Excuse me, is this Studio One?
Did you feel sort of green? Did you know?
Oh,
was your inexperience? Was that something new?
That was the screen.
I had done 6 years of rep, and so I was used to doing big performances on stages in and around England. This was the first telly I'd ever done, so I didn't know about working in front of a camera. It's so different.
You'd always be observing and learning, always that quest for perfectionism.
That rich, velvet voice was a blessing.
He was such a perfect example of an actor to his fingertips.
I remember a glint in the eye. Let's have some fun.
It's like bloke from Emmerdale.
Eric.
God almighty, that's amazing. 45 years.
Could do with a little repaint.
I think it's lovely that it looks all rusty and tinny.
Like us.
Terry Nation went to Ronnie Marsh with a page and a half in his hand and pitched the story to him.
The whole show, for me, was incredibly stressful. We were really all up against it. And all you could really have time to do was concentrate on your particular episode.
But they'll keep coming, pushing us, tracking us. They'll never give up.
Nor will we. When we can handle this ship properly, we'll stop running. Then we'll fight.
They're very good, aren't they, putting these trailers together, all this momentum, all this spectacle. So after all that, BBC Studios were getting ready to fire this in our direction. The rumours were true. The excitement was palpable. The date was fixed-ish pretty soon afterwards. Keith, I've got to say, I was starting to think that this day would never come. Did you sort of have to rub your eyes that day, just as I did when you saw the announcement?
Yeah, I did a bit, to be honest. I've had this on DVD for some years. And when the DVDs were released, they were, quite well packed. They had special features, bits and pieces on, and they were nicely packaged. And I thought that's probably the best we're going to get because at the time, the technology to sort of remaster standard definition imagery into high def and everything wasn't quite there. And I'm looking at the cost that this sort of thing is involved to create this type of thing. I'm really impressed that we got it, and quite excited about it.
A few years ago, I spoke to a few people connected with Blake Seven, with BBC Studios, because we've got contacts there through talking about another science fiction and fantasy TV show. And the answer that we got when we inquired about whether Blake Seven could get this sort of treatment that's been lavished on Doctor Who and other shows and productions, the answer came back that it was simply cost prohibitive. They'd looked into it, but they simply couldn't. There weren't any indicators that there was enough demand out there, Sarah. And that was just a few short years ago. It's amazing how things can turn around, isn't it? Or maybe the market's changed. I don't know. But you messaged me pretty much within an hour of this being announced as well, didn't you? Do you remember?
I did, yes. I was so excited because I did. There was literally no chance that it was going to happen. I just kind of thought, well, as Keith said, at least we've got it on DVD.
Yeah.
I've got this copy. But to see it like this, in this glory, in this detail, and all the extras, and it deserves the treatment. It is just a brilliant show, and it is, I would say, if it's not an institution like Doctor Who, then it is a cornerstone, I think, of our culture. There's something special about Blake Seven that's very different from other shows, and it deserves to be on display like this. So I don't know what the reason was for the turnaround. Maybe everybody just suddenly started watching it on BritBox or whatever. I don't know, but I'm so happy.
Well, hopefully we'll uncover a little bit about this, because the prospect of getting Blake Seven reoffered in this way, it's incredibly seductive, no matter how many times you've seen it. Here's what the press release said when it was announced on the 12th of September 2024. Maximum power. Blake Seven fans can rejoin the rebellion as the iconic BBC sci-fi series comes to Blu-ray with a 6-disc box set of the first series on the 11th of November 2024. All 13 episodes have been newly remastered from the best available sources, including the original film where available. These stories have never looked or sounded so good on home media. Plus, fans can experience their favourite show like never before with brand new, optional, updated effects on every episode, really? Exclusive to this Blu-ray set.
Ooh.
That's the bit that made me go, whoa, what? Because obviously other releases, you get standout serials or stories or moments that get lavish with that little bit more attention, but all 13 with all this pimping out, I suppose. They go on to boast that Blake Seven, the collection series 1, is jam-packed with hours of new and exclusive material. So, as if that wasn't enough, this is those 13 episodes looking better than ever. I mean, Keith, looking back at television, particularly from the 70s up through to the sort of the mid-80s on the BBC, how it was put together was that stuff would get filmed in the studio on 3-wall sets, wasn't it? And then the rest of the material would be filmed out on location, shot on film in the way that a movie would be. And so we got that fabulous film grain, didn't we? Even sitcoms like 3 Up, 2 Down or Sorry, or that kind of, they would have that juxtaposed too, wouldn't they? And as a child, I remember finding that. Well, I always wondered why. There was that sea change, wasn't there? But once they stopped doing it and everything went over to videotape, I really missed the mishmash that was. But now in 2024, it's actually that lack of continuity, I suppose that you could say that material has, is actually a big boon to a release like this, isn't it? Because having elements that are shot on film with all that grain to get into, to bring out that extra detail, this is like a godsend, surely.
Well, it is quite amazing, because up until about probably no more than a decade ago, you would only be able to turn the film elements into high def. So the stuff that they'd shoot on location on 16mm film, you could indeed, scan that and have a high def image. But the stuff shot in the studio on old videotape was always sort of a standard definition. And what's happened is software and, AI and algorithms and all sorts of things are available now that can actually add pixelation, which is amazing. It's just kind of blows my mind that it can do that. And it's great that they can give that treatment to this sort of thing. Of course, the downside of it is going to, it's going to make a lot of the sellotape on set a lot more obvious, if that makes sense.
I thought you were going to say the downside. It's going to really dent the wallet. I mean, I hear the word algorithm so often now, Keith, and I associate it with with evil and with Skynet and things that are trying to get me to do something that I don't want to do and watch things that I don't want to see. But if algorithms are going to let me see Blake Seven looking better than ever, Sarah, maybe it's not all gone Terminator after all.
Yeah, well, everything's got a silver lining, Dan. And this is one of them.
It looks like it. And it's all beautifully packaged with artwork from Lee Binding, also known as T-Lady Design, who we're used to seeing his work across all those Doctor Who releases. So this, in every respect, this looks better, not just better than Blake Seven has ever looked, but better than 99.9% of any vintage TV collections you could find out there in the wild, Keith. You buy a lot of vintage TV and movies, don't you, to add to your home media library. Was this a standout release?
Yeah, I mean, what I like is effectively they have done with this what 20 years ago they did with the 1960s original Star Trek series. And that was not only did they update it for high definition, television broadcasts and, home media. But they also, what was really cool is they added new CGI created visual effects, and they corrected a few mistakes and everything. They didn't alter any of the stories or anything like that. They didn't do any sort of major, George Lucas style changing things. But what they did is that they updated it all, so the visual effects, etc., would hold up. But what was great is when they released it on Blu-ray, you had the option to watch it with the original, optical model effects from the day, or the new CG effects. So you've got the choice. And I'm guessing by the way they've pitched this, you've got the same here. You can watch it with the newly enhanced CG visual effects, or you can watch it as it was originally broadcast. And I think that's brilliant, because that's the best of both worlds. You've got, you'll keep your purists happy, but likewise, you'll update it for the television systems and the technologies that we've got here today. So this, to me, is an absolute perfect blend of nostalgia and a 21st century update, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Having that option makes all the difference. Yeah. They do the same with console games now as well, I understand, Sarah. They remaster those. I know nothing about games. I'm not a gamer. But I know from speaking to gamers that they say, you can go, if you get this for the PS5, you can flip between how it used to look, all those old school graphics, and how it looks now. And that's part of the fun. And I can't see people flitting in between scenes of Seek, Locate, Destroy when it comes to watching Blake 7, because it interrupts the narrative. But and also, you got to do all that pushing and shoving with remotes. I think if you've got a drink on the go and you're petting the dog or whatever else, it can get in the way of the moment. But the principle is kind of the same. I know some people who'd watch both versions of one episode in one afternoon.
Yeah, I think I would. I think I would for certain ones. A couple are coming to mind, like The Web. That one. And Moloch is another one that's immediately springing to mind. It would be very interesting. But yeah, again, I'm happy as long as there's always a choice. I'm not into this where, they update it and it replaces what's come before, because it never sits right with me. But yeah, I'm glad that it's going to keep like both camps happy, and and it's just going to be a joy to just go, explore that and say, what could have been. But there is such a charm to those original effects. The same with Star Trek. Sometimes you just want to see, how it was.
Yeah. I'd forgotten about that with Star Trek, Keith, because of course, by doing that to that vintage Star Trek material, they were able to sell it onto more TV stations again, weren't they, as a package, and future-proof it, I suppose, against further advancements. Certainly that was 2 decades ago. You're quite right. They still show those now. They still re-release those now, and they're still at the business when you watch them back.
Well, the thing is with these is I think the same with both the original Star Trek and with Blake 7, particularly the first season of Blake 7, regardless of the how the effects were achieved and how realistic they might look or whatever, the design of the Liberator, in my opinion, is as good a design of spaceship as the original Enterprise from Star Trek. I mean, these are beautifully designed, amazing models that they made back in the day to film. Yeah. And I think, if they update things with CGI, as long as you're not changing the design, you're not changing the design language and the details of the original models, then I don't really have much of a problem with that. If it's updating things like star fields or laser effects or whatever, that's fine. And this was the thing, that Liberator model, both inside and out, was an absolutely well ahead of its time design, beautifully put together. So that's the thing with me. I have a problem when they change things completely and you don't have the option to watch it as it was. But when they do this, branching versions where you can choose, I think that is the perfect way to own something on physical media.
You're absolutely right, Keith. I mean, these models, they're absolutely gorgeous. The work that went into them. I mean, there's nothing like the Liberator. I think after the TARDIS and Enterprise, it's like the most iconic shapes. Sorry, Star Wars fans, but there's just something so beautiful about it, and completely kind of left field as well. And these models, they deserve to be on the show. So I get a bit antsy about the too much CG. But to use it to enhance, not replace, that's definitely the way forward.
Yeah.
The look of Blake Seven, as you say, Keith, it's tied to a particular time, isn't it? In the history of science fiction, on screen in particular, you can see the influences. It's both before and after. And you can see its contemporaries there as well. Things like Battlestar Galactica, the Millennium Falcon, all that stuff that was around at that really, really exciting time. That's all in play. But so is the heritage of screen science fiction too. There's something a little bit Roger Corman about it all. Maybe even a touch of the Irwin Allens too. And Blake Seven, in the way that it featured, very sophisticated spacecraft in the beginning by trading that in for something that was far, far smaller and pretty much a piece of junk. I wonder whether you've heard that before. It was able to straddle those two sides to one fictional world in a really sort of, if not a believable way, then certainly a way that we could follow and that endeared the characters, and with stories that engrossed as well. It all seemed like the most natural rolling out of a mythology, certainly comparable to anything that was going on the other side of the Atlantic.
Yeah. Well, again, I think the other thing that makes Blake Seven a bit unique, and I didn't necessarily appreciate this so much when I was a child and I first saw this stuff, but when I revisited it as an adult when it came out on VHS and whatever at the time, was the fact that these characters, again, in more recent things, like you mentioned the Battlestar Galactica, like the reimagined Battlestar Galactica from the last 20 years or whatever.
Those two, yeah.
Morally ambiguous characters are kind of a thing now. Most media has that, whereas at the time when Blake Seven came out, you had, obviously it was in that Star Wars era, and Star Wars was always about, rebellion versus empire, light side of the Force, Jedi versus Sith, all of that kind of stuff. In Star Trek, obviously, the Federation was the United Federation of Planets. It was there for the good, the betterment of mankind. Everybody got along, conflicts,
There was a mission statement, wasn't there? A mission statement.
Exactly. Whereas this was quite different because, like they said, it's kind of like the dirty half dozen in space. And you did have very morally ambiguous characters. I mean, Avon is a very complex character, certainly deeper and more complex than a lot of characters were being written in British television of that era. So I do put Blake Seven as something, even though I have huge nostalgia for it, I do put it as something as being quite ahead of its time and groundbreaking.
You're quite right, I feel, that there was something very clearly sort of cowboys and Indians about most shows and movies up to that point. Generally speaking, we knew who the white hats were, we knew who the black hats were, and I think that's generally speaking how people liked it as well. But with this, people did latch onto the characters that perhaps we weren't supposed to. But then again, it was so well written too. I think, as I'm turning this over in my head, Sarah, I think that was always the intention.
Yeah, it's got to have been fun. Yeah, because the writing was so good, particularly all the seasons. I mean, I suppose you could say series 4 was kind of like a reboot in a way, but it all picked on elements that came across, and I love how it evolved. I mean, the show's called Blake Seven, but it was clearly obvious.
The joke that Terry Wogan used to crack on BBC Radio around that time was that there's not 7 of them and there's nobody called Blake in it. And of course, to anybody who doesn't watch the show, that's hilarious. It's still quite funny now. But at the time, if you were a reviewer of it, you think, well, no, your point is, it's Blake 7. We know how it gets here, and that's part of the fun, part of the journey, and part of the spirit of the show, and the embodiment of the characters. And I suppose you could say there's sort of an ideology behind it. There are certainly themes which continue to gain momentum, I think, and to expand throughout the life of the show, even after Terry Nation's departure, the creator, Terry Nation, and when Chris Bowsher was able to take the creative reins fully, Keith.
Yeah, I mean, I think season 1 in particular, the reason that is so strong is because it was a single writer for the whole series, for the whole Series A or season 1 or whatever we call it nowadays.
It's got an arc, isn't it?
Yeah. Terry Nation wrote every episode, and you're absolutely right. It was, yes, it becomes more episodic as time goes on, but that first season was very much serialized, and each sort of episode would not necessarily end on a cliffhanger, but it would lead to the next thing until the 7 were established, which was about halfway through that season. And then obviously then it became more sort of mission of the week or problem of the week, moving forwards. But yeah, I mean, I just think this was, I just think it's really good. Even today, I know some of the visuals people laugh at, and some of the costume choices and hairstyles and all of this sort of thing. But I still think, as a piece of drama, this is really strong. I'm keen to see it. I am keen to see the high def versions with the new visual effects. I'm very curious. As I said, I think from what I gather, they've been quite respectful, and they've not overtly changed things. They've just enhanced things, which is fine by me.
It's in the safest of hands, and this same team, for the most part, are the ones that have been working on Doctor Who material now for like 6 or 7 years. So make no mistake, they love this stuff just as much as we do.
Yeah. Well, they're very much kind of like custodians, aren't they? Which I think is the best approach to take.
Yeah.
I mean, following from what Keith was saying, what I love about Series 1 is that it really takes the time to establish these characters. It takes half the season for the main players to get involved. Even the big baddie doesn't turn up. Is it episode 4 or 5?
Something like that, yeah, the main villain.
Yeah.
On the other side of it, the villains of the piece, they're also shown as being more complicated people initially as well. And so this is something that's generally very, very well constructed, well thought through. I don't wish to sound dismissive anyway, but there's nothing juvenile about this or simplistic when you look under the surface of the fact that people are running around with strange weaponry and wearing outrageous costumes in some respects. Is it from a particularly British perspective, or is it just generally dystopian? I've never been sure whether those things are one and the same. I just know that this hits my sweet spot. And when I found it initially in childhood, it was like nothing else on TV. Here in 2024, of course, several decades on, entertainment has evolved considerably. Home entertainment wasn't even a thing then. The idea that it could be supplemented in this way and celebrated, that would never have been thought of. You had a 5-minute interview on Wogan if you were lucky. Here in 2024, all of these episodes, all 13, are being supported in conversation, where Matthew Sweet conducts 2 new interviews, one with Sally Nivette, who played Jenna Stannis, and another with Michael Bryant, who we saw in the trailer there. There was Liberation, which is a brand new feature-length documentary looking back at the making of the whole of the first season. An archival documentary, previously unreleased, The Making of Blake 7 by Kevin John Davies. That was envisaged originally as a 4-part documentary. Each part lasts an hour. and it was going to go on those original DVD sets way back in 2002, 2003, Keith. I can't quite remember when those came out, but originally those documentaries were for those releases. And of course, they never got there. And the fourth one was never even finished. So all of these finally getting out there officially when they've been on YouTube here and there, if you know where to look, that's a great thing too, because Kevin Davies, there's nobody better at putting these kind of documentaries together than him. Are you aware of those?
Yes, I am, but I know there was some things on the original DVD release, but there's a lot more out there, and I think that's kind of what they've found for this
snippets from them,
right? Yeah,
these are full programs, certainly of broadcast standard. There's a tribute to Stephen Greif, who only died about 18 months ago, didn't he? He was the actor, of course, who played the first incarnation of the villain Travis, the bloke with the bad eye, Sarah.
Yes. Oh, I loved him. I really did. Yeah, that's probably going to be one of the first things I'm going to look at, kind of like extras wise, and yet the documentaries, just to soak up everything, because we know things went wrong. It all went. It's notorious. It's notorious for its problems, and getting stuck in and finding out all about it. It's all part of the fun. Yeah, I just love to hear everything that there is about this series, because it is so treasured. And then these interviews as well. I mean, with Sally and the other people like Jan Chappell. I mean, these actors, they haven't always kind of embraced how much I think Blake 7 has been loved. I actually think maybe some of them might have been a little bit embarrassed, or they didn't really
They were getting on with their careers, weren't they?
Yeah, they did, or they didn't get it at the time. So to have them come back, see them return, and actually feel that love, that's really heartwarming for me to see them come back into the fold.
Yeah, no, it was just a job for them at the time, wasn't it? But I mean, what was also great, and I was a big fan of these as well, is about 15 years or so ago, they started doing quite high production value audio dramas based on.
That's right.
And they brought the original actors back, obviously voice only, so it didn't matter that time had moved on so much. And they actually did them as sort of fill-in episodes between seasons and between specific episodes and whatever. And I remember, I had, well, at the time, CDs of those, for my travels in the car and whatever. And it was great, to have more Blake 7 adventures with the original cast, that would fill in some of the gaps between those episodes. And I think, again, sadly, we've lost quite a few of the actors in more recent years, but it was lovely that there was that opportunity, 15 years ago to come back 30 years on from the series and make, more episodes, albeit audio versions, and I thought that was that was fun as well. So
well, it's as you say,
how it's lived on, isn't it? How the legacy has kind of lived on of the show.
Close your eyes, or mind you, I wouldn't recommend that while you're driving. If you if you close your eyes while you're commuting, or you're listening in the bath, or while you're walking the dog, or something like that, you might say, you can eventually, the fact that the voices are maybe a little huskier and there aren't any pictures, eventually that matters less and less and less, and a lot of those episodes managed to drop in seamlessly into the patchwork of the 52 episodes that were made for television.
No, I love that. I love that you could pad out the adventures and have even more content of Blake 7 was brilliant.
Talking about more content, there's even more in this new Blu-ray set. Rare convention footage we've been promised. There's previously unreleased panels featuring the cast and crew, HD photo galleries with previously unseen images. New images from Blake 7 are being rediscovered all the time, not least of all by Jonathan Helm. And just last year, the Radio Times opened their archives as well, and a whole raft of new pictures were rediscovered. So maybe some of those will make their way into this package too. There's a whole archive, a written PDF archive, production paperwork, scripts, floor plans from the studio, all available for the very first time for those so inclined. It's a real archive of proper treats. I think depending on whatever kind of geek that you are, Sarah, there's something in these sets for you, isn't it? I would never, for example, sit there looking at floor plans, but I know lots of fans that do.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah, there's something for everyone. I can imagine fans poring over these floor plans and the scripts. Scripts are usually quite interesting to see, what was originally in them and the changes. Yeah, that can be quite fun, but I don't think I'd want to do it for every single episode.
Studio rushes is what a lot of people go through as well. Hours and hours of them to sort of get the bits where something went wrong, or where their favourite scene was being filmed over and over again. Every fluff of every line, anything that was cut. Keith, people are fascinated by this kind of. For me, it's a little bit like seeing too much behind the curtain sometimes, but it's just like having the optional effects. It's there if you want it, but if you don't, your experience isn't being tainted in any way.
Yeah, no, I mean, for me, obviously, home media, being one of my passions, that is one of the things of physical home media is the fact that you don't only get multiple versions of the film or show that you've purchased, you get it in the best, both audio and video quality, but also the fact that you've got things like trailers, deleted scenes, behind the scenes featurettes, audio commentaries, PDFs, all of these things I think are, like you said, they're there if you want them. And if you are a collector and a completist, it's great to have those things. And, I never believed that we'd get Blake 7 on Blu-ray. And I know you can buy the entire series for less money than you can get this first Blu-ray set, if you buy them on DVD. But at the same time, it does look like not only the improved picture and everything, but you're getting a lot more bang for your buck on top.
So which feature will you head for first, Keith, or are you going to just go straight to the episodes?
I think, to be honest, for me, I am going to be massively intrigued to see what they've done with the new visual effects. I know the episodes quite well as they are, so I will probably dig in and start watching, the first few episodes with the new visuals and seeing if I recognize, if I can actually tell which ones are new, and whether they're jarring or not. Which I've got a feeling they'll do this very well, actually. And I'm just keen to see it looking the best it's ever looked. I'm very keen to revisit it that way.
Because the DVDs were fine, weren't they? But it was over 2 decades ago.
Yeah, I mean, the DVDs, at the time, the picture and audio was remastered as much as they could do at the time with the technology that they had from the sources. And they were nicely packaged. They had, some bonus features on them. So I literally thought that the 4 DVD sets were all we were going to get, and I was quite happy with that. I still have them on DVD, and they sit in the collection. But this is something else, and right down to the artwork that they've used for this new packaging, I just think it looks fantastic. So yeah, I'm excited for this.
Yeah, I won't be getting rid of my DVDs. In fact, I've still got my VHS tapes.
Well, the VHS tapes, you see, that's quite interesting, because one of the things I remember is because you couldn't always, I like I said, I was a small child when these first came out, and I had some memory of them. But then they did release some VHS ones quite early on that were.
That's right, the omnibus ones.
They were kind of abridged. They were turned into sort of mini TV movies. Yeah. But even though that's not great, you cut out.
I bought those too.
Yeah, exactly. At the time, I was like dead chuffed to get hold of those. And I remember I would save up my pocket money and buy them each time they were released. You know, I think there were about 4 or 5.
That's right. Yeah, there was 4, but that 9 years in between the series ending in 81. Okay, I think there was a repeat in 1983 of the final season, but those 9 years between 81 and them coming out properly on VHS, affordably and in their true form, it felt like an eternity. So, yeah, and I think no matter how familiar you are with these episodes, seeing them again as well, they were so well written, so well made. There's always something new to find, whatever mood that you're in. How about you, Sarah? What are you going to make? What are you going to take aim for first in this new Blu-ray set when it does arrive?
I think I'm going to be the same as Keith. I'm going to start at the beginning. I always watch the collection in order. I can't just go to one episode. It's got to be in order so I can see the series arc.
I'm the same.
Yeah, kind of a bit OCD, but I have to do it. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, you know, if I can spot the differences. I think I will. I think there's some episodes obviously I've watched more than other. But yeah, that first episode. I mean, what you call it a pilot episode these days, but I've never seen anything so grim and brutal in my science fiction. And this is me, coming from Game of Thrones generation. I couldn't believe what I was watching, and Dan, I only came to Blake 7 for the anniversary, so that was
For the 40th anniversary.
40th, so that was 2018. So obviously way behind you two.
Right.
But as obsessed and impressed as both of you, and if I'd have seen this as a child, it would have just blown my mind. It's exceptional television.
The first episode is anachronistic, even compared to the episodes that come later in that season, isn't it? Never mind the things that would come later. Real standout piece of television. It reminds me of something more so like The Prisoner. Maybe I don't know. Me, I'm going to be heading straight for Liberation, the feature-length documentary from Moon Balloon Productions. Now, that's the work of Chris Chapman, who we've had on the Doctor Who podcast. A whole feature-length documentary, completely new material, talking to people that they've never spoken to before, put together by a team who've made so many superb documentaries in the past. I'm looking at it as an appetizer to getting my eyes on those old episodes in their new form, because you're quite right, Keith. I'm going straight to the new special effects as well. I've seen the others so many times. I've seen the originals so many times. They can't be tainted in any way, even if some of them don't meet my standards or don't live up to how I would do it or how I've imagined them. It's fine. I'm very happy to be led through one of my all-time favourite series yet again. So, when we look back to that blurb there for this brand new Blu-ray release, this is how they've repitched the opening series in 2024, maybe to people who are straddlers, who are floating, who are casuals, wondering whether they're going to buy this or not. Framed for crimes he did not commit, freedom fighter Blake escapes a prison ship and enlists a crew of rogue heroes to fight back against the tyrannical Federation. With Avon, Villa, Jenna, Callie and Gan, Blake boards a fantastical spacecraft, the Liberator, and begins his quest to free the galaxy. This has been notoriously termed by its creator, Terry Nation, no less, as the Dirty Dozen in space. In fact, that was the original pitch he'd have had, you believe. Doesn't sound like anything especially radical at the time, and now in a sort of post-Guardians of the Galaxy world, even less so. But in 1978, on BBC One, in prime time, this series made a big impact. I'd be lying if I said, as a 4-5-year-old, when I first saw this show, I was attracted to anything other than the cool spaceships, the weird guns, and the pretty girls, Sarah. But later on, I did find considerably more in there. What did hold your attention about it? As you say, you're part of the Game of Thrones generation. You could be streaming any one of a number of shows, couldn't you? So what's made you so keen to get back to Blake 7?
It's these characters. There really is nothing like them. I mean, Avon, they broke the mould with Avon anyway. I don't even know what you describe him as. Because to say he's an anti-hero, I think that does him a disservice. Although, there are elements to that. And, he has moments of being heroic. It's so complicated. You still feel like even by series 4 or series D, whatever we're calling it, that you're only just beginning to, scratch beneath the surface. He's got all these layers, keeps everything to himself. His backstory's fantastic, although you still never get the full story. You just get them little breadcrumbs like in Rumours of Death, which I
don't think you ever do about any of them. It's ideal for such as Big Finish or for writers like prose writers to sort of get into these characters and tell us stories about their past that don't necessarily contradict anything because so little has been said.
But yeah, and that's the beauty of it. There is still that air of mystery, and I think there should be. All of that, Blake's not your typical hero. As a leader, he's got many flaws. He's not perfect at all. He's not, a Robin Hood character by any means. He makes his mistakes. He gets misguided. This vendetta gets personal. He's just a really, really good human character. The female characters are fantastic. No damsels in distress here, far from it. They're all pretty capable. There is also the embodiment of the strong female, trope that so many franchises are suffering with now. They can't get it right. Well, look at this series. You've got multiple examples of how to do this kind of character, and all the women are different. They all bring the different qualities. I've always been particularly struck by Jenna and Callie. Callie with her telepathic abilities and that kind of more. She's kind of more the conscience of the group. Villa is another one because on the face of it, he's so. You think, well, he's the Joker of the pack, he's the coward, but he really isn't. He's got all these layers to it, and it's beautiful seeing how he develops.
He seems like a cuddly uncle, a cuddly, boozy uncle, a benign presence. But when the darker side to his nature does show itself, you think, "Oh, I don't know if I like that or not. I don't know if I like him or not." And that's with Villa. Yeah, it's probably more palpable than all the others because, to say, he's on outwardly that little bit more personable, relatable.
You can't. Yeah, in some instincts they are really relatable, in others they're not, and that's kind of thing. You're kind of rooting for these people, but you don't always know whether you can trust them, whether you even like them. Servalan, is it really bad to root for the villain of the piece? But you can't help it because, again, she's wonderfully written. You get to see how she copes, having power and then in danger of losing it all the time, and how she claws it back and how she's got to defend herself. It's just fascinating seeing it all play out.
I think it's okay to root for a villain when that villain is played by Jacqueline Pierce.
Well, exactly.
She insists on it, or she did insist on it. She was a wonderful character, Jacqueline Pierce.
And it just works. But it's and like I said about like the Game of Thrones kind of comparison, it does test your morals. Leave characters die. Who's going to survive? Who's not? And that really ups the stakes and makes you want to carry on watching, see what's going to happen, and it's just absolute thrill.
Watching this roll out, Keith, whereas something like Star Trek, which I adore, and particularly The Next Generation, exists in quite a stable fictional world. Whereas in Blake 7, and it's they're on the flagship of a very impressive fleet on diplomatic missions for the most part. Everything's very, very stable, and it's kind of about extending that stability, and it's about diplomacy and about the human adventure in many respects. Whereas in Blake 7, nothing is secure at all. You always get the feeling that there's something rumbling under the surface, that the plates could shift at any time, and they do in between most seasons to one degree or another, and you have to get your sea legs again as to who is where and why. So yes, it may not be as dense as the likes of Game of Thrones or The Walking Dead or any of these shows we're used to now, but for its time, there's so much more in this than meets that initial first impression.
No, that's what I mean when I say that this was ahead of its time, because put aside the production values of the or the methods that it was made under or whatever. When you look at the story and the characters, they're very much what you would typically get today on a said Walking Dead show or whatever. It's very much ahead of its time from that point of view, I think. And as I said, I feel it kind of fits in its own little universe of continuity, and it sort of works. Okay, the Travis thing doesn't, but you can't have everything, right?
I mean, Keith, what I wanted to ask you, coming from your home media background in particular, is that looking at this release, which we're anticipating, savouring, in fact, we've got this, how excited we've all been about it. But the narrative out there broadly is that physical media is dying. So people such as you and I, sometimes we're given the side eye from other people in our lives who are years past the point where they've just jettisoned their entire stash of Blu-rays, DVDs, any disc of any description, never mind tapes or anything else, all in favour of streaming.
Yeah,
and yet here is the arrival of Blake 7, albeit it's in a staggered pattern in this new way. And we can't get enough of this stuff. I mean, even though it's a mainstream TV show from decades past, are we now straddling into the territory now where this could be considered to be a boutique release, even though it's by a major brand like BBC Studios?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I look at physical media as the collector's medium. And when I say physical media, I don't just mean Blu-rays and DVDs. I mean vinyl. I mean books. Anything that's a physical copy of something, and I look at that as I said, the collector's medium. However, there is no doubt about the fact that from a convenience point of view, streaming, offers so much as well. You can watch it anywhere on multiple devices. You don't have to have shelf space everywhere in your home. There's reasons for both, and I don't think that physical media is dead at all. I think it's changed. I think back in the heyday of VHS and DVD, obviously there was a big rental market in those days, and also people would collect it because there was no alternative, and everything was mass produced in high volumes. Nowadays, because we've got so much choice and because you can pretty much watch most things online, there's still a lot of things you can't. But, for people who want the packaging, they want the documentaries, they want the deep dives, they want the special features, they want the best quality versions, all of that stuff. We'll always have the physical media. And as long as we've got, a player to play them on, a system to play it through, I don't think they'll go anywhere. And I think as we get now with Arrow and Vinegar Syndrome and all these Criterion, all these different brands, film and TV shows will still live on, and they will have, as I said, specific boutique releases for the hardcore collectors medium, and they'll be made in fewer quantities, which is why the price will have gone up a little bit. But for the people who really value it, I mean, you know, £39 to have a 13 episode show in the best quality you can get it, with loads of bonus features in nice packaging. I mean, that's not, people could say that's expensive, but from a collector's point of view, I don't necessarily think that's unreasonable. With the
It's a round of drinks. It's a round of drinks at some pubs.
It's exactly that. It's exactly that. It's a week's worth of coffees or a round of drinks at the pub, or however you want to look at it. But the point is, I can see why they've priced it this way, because they would have put a lot of resource into getting it this far. And that's why I believe, to go back to your question you asked me right at the beginning of this conversation, I didn't actually think we'd ever see it on Blu-ray, because I thought the DVDs was probably the best you were going to get. And I knew it would have to go through an awful lot of work and people and personnel and time and whatever to produce something like this. And I think it's great that people care enough, and the BBC, you know, have been open-minded enough to actually put the resource into it. And I hope this will be a successful release for them, because obviously if this one does well, we'll get the other 3 seasons. But I think you can almost guarantee that if this doesn't sell, we won't see any more of the...
God willing, they make it through, so we get all 4 box sets, the entire life of this fabulous classic sci-fi TV series from the late 70s and into the early 80s in this shiny new disc form. It's the same with the Doctor Who's. You know, we've had several people from the Doctor Who range on the Type 40 podcast, and they say it's not set in stone that that range will complete either. Literally every release depends on the success of the last one. So yeah, get behind this range. If you want Blake 7 at some point, don't wait. Pull the trigger now, obviously, if you can. I did want to ask you, Keith, you know, are we perilously close to a time where manufacturers could stop making Blu-ray players, or is that still pie in the sky for the time being? Because it seems to me like already we have a lot of complaints about programs disappearing from streaming platforms. It feels like the comeback of physical media may actually be on the way before it's truly disappeared.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, you know, at the moment, Blu-ray players for sure are easily available, and will also, they're backward compatible with DVD. There is this whole thing, and please check out my channel if you want an explanation of it, but there's this whole thing about regions, which is again a way of controlling the marketplaces where things are sold. But you know, you can even buy players now that will play multi-region Blu-rays and DVDs. So there are ways around it. Things are available.
And it's I do think the physical media, you know, there is definitely a revival, and I think that's because I think streaming's gone as far as it can. It's got big, you know, there's so many streaming places now. In fact, there's far too many. People can't afford to have them all, and I think a lot of people are getting fed up of, I've got to sign up for this one so I can watch that, or to get access to that one. And you know, you just can't do it anymore. So I think it is going to have to end up being streamlined.
Yeah, you can easily spend a couple of £100 a month if you want all of the streaming services, and then you've got to have time to watch them all anyway.
Yeah,
so.
and then, you know, and then they take them off or they change them. You know, we know Disney Plus is a bugger for editing things and changing things at the last minute. And yeah, I think best thing to do, get your physical copy. Nobody can take that away from you. I've still got a VHS player in my loft.
Well, there you go.
But I need it. I've still got some VHSs.
Point proven.
Yep.
Blake 7, The Collection Series 1 is released on the 11th of November 2024 in the UK from BBC Studios, following on the 18th of December in North America. Obviously, prices may vary depending on your retailer of choice. Yeah, mine was on pre-order. I think within about 10 minutes of me seeing seeing the listing.
I was the same as soon as I saw it. I stuck to you. I was like, I'm getting it.
Boom. Fire all thrusters. Yeah, to get this in my life, beautifully packaged and looking better than ever. I think you could tell that we're all thrilled that Blake 7 is arriving on Blu-ray. You may be too, or have you got some misgivings about this? Get in touch. Let us know here at Teleport, the Blake 7 podcast. That was Teleport, the Blake 7 podcast. Could we return with more intergalactic intelligence and more teleport in the future? Well, that's down to you. You have to look out for that wherever you found this. All our links are in the show notes and the information is in the video description too. Don't be shy though. We're not telepaths here. Get in touch. Teleport, care of the Spacebook at outlook.com. Sign up with a ragtag bunch of fellow Blake 7 fans too over in the long-standing Teleport Blake 7 Facebook group. All that's required to seek and locate is to tap Teleport, a Blake 7 group, into the search field over there on Facebook, and you're away, standard by however much geekiness your little digits can take. Sarah and Keith, thanks for joining me on this inaugural mission here.
Thank you for having us. I couldn't wait to talk about this. I'm so excited.
Have we taken that enthusiasm, that excitement that you already had, Sarah, and just simply pushed it up some more? You can't wait now for the postie to bring the Blu-rays.
Before it was just me, just talking to you, and now I'm talking to Keith as well, and talking to lots of people. And yeah, I want everybody to watch it. And if you've never seen it, you must give it a chance. I think you'll love it. And if you're a Doctor Who fan, you definitely need to watch it because there's so many crossovers. Actors, names,
actors, writers, producers, directors, you name it. They're there, plastered all over it, aren't they?
It's amazing to spot. It's so much fun. That could be a sport in itself.
It is indeed. And Keith, obviously from Home Media Minefield, what is, for the people out there who don't know, what is Home Media Minefield and where can people find it?
It's a channel where we look at physical media releases, we do unboxings, we do reviews of certain releases, and we also talk about the technology involved in home media. So yeah, check us out on YouTube at Home Media Minefield.
Keith Isles is my go-to guy when it comes to... Why are you laughing? He's my go-to guy on anything concerning ratios and bit rates and all manner of algorithms.
You've made him sound like a maths teacher.
I have, haven't I? Here's Johnny Ball. Yes, sir. And I'm Dan Hadley, Birmingham's king of the geeks. You can hunt me down on Instagram and X as the Spacebook, geeking out about whatever catches my eye, my imagination, or both in pop culture across movies, TV, comics, and all manner of other things. Yes, the rebellion begins again here and there on Teleport, the Blake 7 podcast. We'll speak to you all again soon. Bye-bye.
Villa, get us out of here.